Meeting of July 23rd, 2018. Madam Clerk, have we met all the noticing requirements for this meeting?
Yes, Mayor.
And please call the roll.
Yes, Mayor. Mr. Cohen is absent. Ms. Howard?
Here.
Mr. Liverman?
Here.
Ms. Cromiller is absent. Mr. Quinn?
Here.
Ms. Fraga?
Here.
Mayor Lampert?
Here. And now please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We will start with approval of minutes, and we have the May 7th, 2018 minutes on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Fraga,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes passed unanimously. And now we come to tonight's award of recognition, and I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Fraga.
Thank you, Mayor. On behalf of Mayor and Council, I am both honored and excited to be presenting this award to Coach Chris Ayers, recognizing him as a leader of the wrestling community of Princeton. In 2006, as part of a rebuilding effort at Princeton University, Coach Chris Ayers was chosen as head coach of the wrestling program at the university. He has labored for 12 years to turn Princeton wrestling into a nationally ranked team and was named the EIWA Coach of the Year in 2017 and was twice named Ivy League Coach of the Year. He has produced several All-Americans, a third-place finisher in the NCAA National Tournament, and cemented Princeton wrestling as a national contender and a home for genuine scholar athletes. Coach Ayers has had an impressive professional career, but that is not why we are here today. We gather together today to acknowledge Chris Ayers' tireless commitment to Princeton youth athletics and to the dedicated team that he has built to advance the interests of boys and girls in and around the municipality of Princeton. Under Coach Ayers' leadership and in cooperation with the leadership of the Princeton Recreation Department, a successful public-private transformation took place. The Princeton Recreation Department had for many years run a youth wrestling program titled the Princeton Amateur Wrestling Society, or PAWS for short. Coach Ayers had a vision which was to promote the sport of wrestling and utilize its discipline to instill character, confidence, work ethic, mental toughness in Princeton kids. And in keeping with his own values, PWC espoused 5 core values: community, integrity, excellence, respect, and inclusivity. True to these values under Coach Ayers' leadership, PWC has accomplished a great deal in a few short years. I want to highlight a few of these accomplishments, though I know it's not all. PWC established 3 youth programs: the Cubs for grades 1 to 3, the Youth for grades 4 through 8, and the Elite program for grades 9 through 12. PWC has had year-over-year growth of over 50% in each of these programs. Coach Ayers' commitment to provide girls with an opportunity to wrestle breaks all paradigms and ensures that female athletes have equal access to pursue their dreams. Coach Ayers' commitment to assisting underprivileged youth led to the creation of the PWC Scholarship Fund to ensure that no wrestler gets left behind, providing funds for disadvantaged youth in and around Princeton for participation fees and equipment. PWC has also assisted with the creation of new opportunities for young aspiring athletes, most notably in Trenton, where PWC has helped the emerging Trenton Youth Wrestling Organization to build a community of scholar athletes that will explore the arts and sciences, as well as pursue the proud PWC tradition of athletic achievement. Coach Ayers was instrumental in bringing the 52nd NWCA All-Star Classic to Princeton, which included a boys and girls youth clinic with 3 Olympic gold medalist instructors. Personally, Coach Ayers has been a tireless advocate for children and athletics. He has visited area elementary schools, and using wrestling as a vehicle, he has delivered positive, inclusive, and uplifting messages to the Princeton Community School children about overcoming adversity and reaching for success in all endeavors. These presentations have been very well received, and several school principals have commented on the positive effects. For youth as young as kindergarten through high school, PWC continues to deliver tremendous value to athletes regardless of sex, race, or economic status. Coach Ayers' commitment to wrestling at Princeton University is obvious. But today, it is my honor to present this award of recognition for all that he has done to empower our youth and to applaud his commitment to the greater Princeton community. Coach Ayers' actions are over and above what we have come to expect. His leadership serves as a shining example of the powerful things that Princeton and the university can achieve together. Coach Ayers is the principal force and vision behind PWC, and today we recognize his commitment to the youth of Princeton, his vision to see beyond the borders of the university, and his leadership for ensuring the continued success of this outstanding program, the legacy of which will redefine the term scholar athlete. So before I step down to hand the award, I know it takes more than a village to create for this program. So I wanted to ask all the parents and helpers that assist with whether record keeping, setting up the mats, can you please stand? And now, our young wrestlers who have benefited from the program, please stand. All the wrestlers.
Wow, I didn't expect such a crowd. I feel a little nervous with all these little wrestlers behind me. They might take my legs out or something. First and foremost, I want to thank the mayor and the Princeton Council for recognizing me and the Princeton Wrestling Club with this award. I'd also like to thank the Princeton Rec Department, who has supported our efforts for a very long time, back when we were known as PAWS. The university has also been a great partner by opening up the beautiful campus and wrestling room to the youth of the Princeton area. I'm also appreciative that my boss, Molly Marcoux, realizes the importance of community and pushes the department to connect beyond the walls of campus. She created an acronym that drives the department's actions with the letters a tiger corresponding to some specific values within the department. The E stands for engaged. I view the engagement in the community, and that's what I do through the PWC. I firmly believe to create a great community organization, a small group of volunteers with passion and dedication work tirelessly to serve that group and make it the best it can be. As you can see, it's a little more than a small group here. We have a pretty big group, which is nice. The PWC started long before I got here under the name of PAWS, and I believe we'll achieve even greater things when I'm gone because of the people surrounding the program. While I'd like to recognize them all, I run the risk of forgetting one. So I'm just going to say thank you and accept this award on behalf of all the work that has been done, all the work we are doing right now, and all the future endeavors
that will make the Princeton Wrestling Club one of the great youth programs in the country. I'm passionate about Princeton and honestly feel so fortunate that I live in what I believe in is one of the best towns in the country. I'm also passionate about wrestling and the sport in general, not for the wins and losses, but rather for the lessons that can be learned through sport. Princeton needs the best wrestling youth program, not only to be great at sport, but to offer kids the opportunity to learn life lessons through sport. The most wonderful part about having a great wrestling program in Princeton is that wrestling is one of the most inclusive sports. No matter your size, you get matched up by weight. So anyone can wrestle, no matter how big or small. No matter your race, you can wrestle. No matter your financial background, you can wrestle. All you need is a pair of wrestling shoes, and PWC offers scholarships, and we have a motto, no wrestler left behind. Also, physical disabilities don't limit your success in wrestling. The NCAA tournament is like the Super Bowl of wrestling, and several years back, an individual with one leg won an NCAA national championship. I don't think that can be done in any other sport. Finally, women can wrestle. This is the new frontier. They've kind of been left away, and now we're including them as much as possible, and now it's the fastest growing women's sport in the country. And with the work of the PWC, we're working with the NJSIAA, and we believe we'll have a state division for women at this year's state tournament. So thanks again for recognizing the PWC efforts, and we will continue to serve the Princeton community for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations. And everyone is welcome to stay, but you're not obligated to stay. So if you want to go, now is probably a good time if you're going to go. And I would just ask, we have other things on the agenda, so if you can take your conversations out, that would be appreciated. Thank you so much.
Wow. Wait, what was so funny? What was so funny?
Yeah. You know, Jenny's daughter was the first girl to wrestle at GHS. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. They've come.
Yeah. All right. So we do have a full agenda tonight, so we're going to keep moving. And next is going to be comments from the public for items that aren't already on the agenda. And we're going to start with Andrew Kuntz. I think we're going to close those back doors so we can hear a little better. But I'd like to welcome up Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah. I can never figure that out.
Yeah. Andrew, why don't you just come on up and speak loudly? I know it's in you.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just want to begin by thanking you for giving me this opportunity to address you. I'm Andrew Kuntz. I'm a Princeton resident, 70 Spruce Street, but I'm also a Mercer County freeholder. And I wanted to begin by applauding Mayor and Council and Princeton Engineering and PBAC for allowing the Beta bike lane on the Wiggins-Hamilton corridor to go forward. I was one of the volunteers who got out there and did some lane striping. And I was really struck by the outpouring of volunteer effort there because I think it really demonstrated the level of support bikeability and sustainability has in this community. If you've got volunteers out there striping lanes on their hands and knees, you've got some committed people. I got a chance to ride the Beta bike lane and also on my bicycle and also travel Wiggins Street in my car while the test was ongoing, and I was truly struck by what an improvement the lane made for both transportation modes. I'm a confident cyclist, but I tell you, for the first time in 25 years as a Princetonian, over 25 years as a Princetonian, I actually felt comfortable riding my bicycle down Wiggins Street without feeling somehow that I'm getting in the way of a car. Also, as a driver, I really felt it was an improved experience. The lane just felt wider. I don't know if it physically was wider. It felt wider, and there was an improved visibility due to the lack of obstruction, I guess, of a line of parked cars that existed on the road. So in that case, maybe a win-win. But as a fellow elected official, I know that there's no decisions that you as a municipal body make where you're always in a win-win situation. There's always going to be a trade-off. And let's state the obvious. In order to create a bike lane on the Wiggins-Hamilton corridor, you're going to have to remove some on-street parking. Now, this isn't the first time I've appeared before this body to talk about a pretty similar issue about, the value of removing on-street parking. And last I spoke to you, I tried to provide some kind of framework that would help you evaluate different uses of the right-of-way and how to measure bike lanes versus parking. Now, there are others that are going to speak to you, and there's going to be a whole presentation that will be very informative about the necessity of a bike lane in this corridor. My expertise as a former Princeton Borough Council member is really parking. We have lots of different kinds of parking in this community. We have parking garage. We have metered lot parking. We have permit parking on street. We have metered on-street parking. We have free on-street parking that is time limited, and we also have free on-street parking that is not time limited. Each of these types of parking has a different value to the community. Clearly, the parking as a municipality, it has a different value to the municipality. Clearly, metered pay-for parking is of the highest value. That's the parking garage and all the metered parking. Very high value to the municipality. But unless you seek to extend the bike lane beyond Witherspoon Street and onto Paul Robeson, we're not really talking about that kind of parking. What we're talking about, what exists on the Wiggins-Hamilton corridor now, is really two types of parking. 2-hour free parking on Wiggins Street and all-day free parking on the rest of Hamilton Avenue. Now, some may believe that these streets' proximity to downtown makes it very valuable parking. Perhaps, but apparently your predecessors on prior municipal governing bodies didn't think it was that valuable, because I know if Princeton Borough Council thought the parking was that valuable, they had a way of indicating that they thought it was valuable. You know what it was? We put a meter on it, right? That indicated that we thought it was a valuable, good, proximate parking. If we didn't do that, it showed that we thought it was of less value. Now, if you are yourselves persuaded that this parking along this particular corridor is so valuable that it can't be lost, then I would suggest you set up meters or kiosks or what have you in the future and actually charge people for it. It should be metered if it's that valuable. Because unless this parking is converted to metered pay parking, it's just 2-hour free parking or all-day free parking, and this is not something this community or this municipality lacks. If you remove it here, it's a simple walk to go find more, a simple drive to go find more. There's plenty more within an easy walk of Wiggins Street or Hamilton Avenue. What this town does lack is bike lanes, especially on this very important corridor that connects the middle school, the high school, Westminster Quad College, and the Tree Street neighborhood with the Arts Council, the library, the whole downtown business dining district. As I said, parkers can easily find alternative parking spots, but cyclists cannot easily find another route to get to downtown from this area. They can either take Nassau Street, or they can take the Wiggins-Hamilton corridor. When it comes to the Wiggins-Hamilton Quarter as opposed to Nassau Street, this governing body has an opportunity to make it safer, to make it more connective, to make it more sustainable by adding a bike lane. Otherwise, cyclists are taking their case to the state in Nassau Street. You have the opportunity to improve the safety and connectivity of the right-of-way for all users, be they cyclists, pedestrians, and drivers. And I think you should keep that in mind as you weigh next steps. I am certain that the safety of cyclists, the recommendations of your own bike master plan, your own complete streets policy, it will be much on your mind as you make that decision. And I'm sure the findings of your own parking studies will also guide you. But in the end, I hope you will take the steps necessary to create permanent bike lanes on the Wiggins-Hamilton corridor, and then the next time I get to help out installing a beta bike lane, it will be at a new and different and exciting location. I thank you for listening to me, and I wish you the best as you make Princeton a more bikeable and sustainable community. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to continue on with the sign-up sheet that was on the podium before the meeting, and I noticed that there are a couple more people here who signed up to comment on the bike lane. You're welcome to do that during the public comment, but I'd ask that there are a lot of people here tonight, so I think everybody gets one bite at the apple. So if you comment during public comment, that means there's going to be a chance for a comment on the bike lane when we do the report, so you should choose. If you have to leave early, then when I call your name, come up and make your comment. If you want to wait until after the report, you can do that too. But if you speak during public comment, I'm going to ask that we leave the comment period for people who haven't spoken yet when we get to the report. The next person on the list is Galina.
Okay, I'll have to lower this. Is that good? Okay, good evening. And today I'm here not just to talk about the damage on my property trees during the construction by RB Homes. However, I'll start with a quick update on that just for council and for those in the audience who've been following this case closely. This is a highly visible case, so perhaps you would want to know that as of this moment, Mr. Barsky still has not agreed to cover the cost of the root feeding by a qualified provider. And also, he has continued to violate a warning from the engineering department regarding establishing and maintaining tree protection of the trees, of remaining trees on his property, 260 Hawthorne. So these violations and other violations by Mr. Barsky are on the agenda at tomorrow's Shade Tree Committee meeting. This is a public meeting. Everyone is welcome to attend. It's at 5 o'clock at 1 Monument Drive. With that, I'll move to a different topic. And I would like to bring attention of council to serious and very clear gaps that exist in the engineering department process for approval of the demolition and construction permits, as well as monitoring construction sites. Yes, I was told that's an internal engineering issue. However, this internal issue has a profound external impact. I have wasted more than 2 months of my life, not just monitoring construction by Mr. Barsky, but fighting inch by inch, day after day, to make sure that his construction process aligns with municipal ordinances and orders. Along the way, I was personally threatened by Mr. Barsky Jr., and I had to listen to so much profanity that I haven't heard in my entire life. This is unacceptable practice. And I'm not paid for this job. This is not my job to monitor construction sites. So my question to council is, and to the engineering department, why the people, the engineering staff, whose job is exactly that, monitoring construction site, make sure that municipal ordinances are followed, are not doing it? And what council is planning to change and what action to take? And this is especially true for tear downs. As everyone knows, tear downs are damaging to Princeton neighborhoods. And just as a quick illustration, I will pass around the view of the street, Hawthorne Avenue, before and after the tear down. So tear downs are a very important for this community issue. Different residents have raised their concerns, made proposals multiple times, but I haven't been able to find any initiative, municipal initiative, or any plan where tear downs would have been in scope. Even in famous neighborhood character initiative, which, by the way, hasn't produced anything executable since its inception in May of 2016, doesn't have tear downs in scope. And the only response we hear from the mayor is, we cannot do anything. New Jersey law doesn't allow us to act. Absolutely, you can and you must. Developers, and I will cite another residents, Princeton neighborhoods are under assault by developers. You have to realize that. And while you've been ignoring this issue, Princeton redevelopment has been spreading like metastatic cancer. One cancer cell, a McMansion, detaches from parental tumor business, developer's business, and gets implanted in a Princeton neighborhood. In no time, that neighborhood, like a healthy organ, becomes cancerous. And cancer moves on to the next organ. And that's an issue that's been causing problems with residents for over a decade. A decade. I have a paper from New York Times, an article from New York Times, which I will pass along, which dates back to 2005. And since then, nothing has been done to address this issue.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
yeah.
I think that
Message
it's been
is
over
clear.
3 minutes,
So,
but the
yes,
timer's
and
not working.
I will
just
just
a little bit.
finish with one citation from this article dating to 2005. Borough officials, there was borough at that time, who have been fine-tuning an anti-McMansion ordinance since last spring, 2004, but had not addressed the issue of housing teardowns, plans to have a general discussion of these matters, but not until late October 2005. Thank you. I will
Okay,
be
thank
happy
you.
to-
And I just wanted to respond to one of the things you said, which is paraphrasing my remarks about what we can do to address the teardown issue. We have launched a neighborhood character initiative, and we did pass a series of ordinance changes, and we're planning on another series of ordinance changes to help. We have to do it indirectly because we're not allowed to prevent tear downs themselves. So our approach has been to change the ordinances in terms of what you can build as new construction in its place, and part of that might hopefully encourage renovation when that's possible, instead of some of the ordinances right now, which might encourage someone to tear down a house and build new. So it's, oftentimes as a municipality, we're governed by what the state allows us to do, what authority they've granted us. You can shake your head, but I'm just telling you the facts. And we can't do something effective if we don't know what the rules are and how we can act within those parameters. So we're working on it. I encourage you to come to the meetings when we're discussing things. As we heard with the bike lane, a lot of things, it's a trade-off too. And so when we change the ordinances or change the zoning, it can have other impacts. And that's why it's important that the community is involved in those discussions and people understand what the impacts are going to be, both positive and negative. So we are working with a consultant. We're hoping to bring those ordinances forward probably within the next month, I'm hoping. All right, next is Jen Harford.
Hi, I have a couple of questions that relate to this. With regard to the house on Hawthorne Street, I understand that Mr. Barsky continues to violate the tree protection ordinance and ignores the engineering department orders. My question for the for the commission are, how do you plan to address violations, and is there any tracking of violations? If I park and forget to pay the meter, I am made accountable quite quickly. If I do this on numerous occasions, you can be sure it will come up easily on a police report. Princeton needs to reevaluate what it chooses to enforce vigorously in order to truly help its residents. My other question, also regarding to this, and you addressed some of this right now, the Neighborhood Character and Zoning Initiative exists to spearhead a comprehensive review and revision of our residential zoning to address the many teardowns and out-of-scale and out-of-place new construction. How will you go about creating new rules and ordinances you are referring to? And if, once you create those, how will you enforce them? And what are your plans and what is your timeline to get this done? Thank you.
Okay, so for the first question, I can't have a back and forth with you, but I will answer all your questions. So the first question was, if there's a violation, what's the process? And the process is, like any other violation, that there'd be a citation given and that the person who's in violation would need to come probably here, right here, to municipal court. So that's the process for that. In terms of the Neighborhood Character Initiative process, there have been already many public meetings. There have been some smaller meetings with neighborhood groups, with local architects and local developers. And the process right now is that the ordinances are being drafted and reviewed by our attorneys. They'll come to council for an ordinance introduction. There'll be public comment at that time, and then they'll come back again for a public hearing and a vote. So that will be the process. And there's, as I said, there was a first phase. Right now, where the attorneys are working on drafting a second set that have to do with landscaping, with the amount of fill that's allowed, with height restrictions, with garage placement. And then there's probably some other things that I'm forgetting as part of that package. And then there's going to be another phase after that where we're going to be looking at accessory dwelling units, duplexes, and changes we can make to impact the affordability issue. So it is fairly comprehensive, and we are doing our best to get community input at every step along the way. And there's been a lot of press coverage of it too. Oh, maybe I'm out of time for my responses.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In the case of Mr. Barsky, have you issued the citations?
Oh, have there been any citations issued to Mr. Barsky at this
Yes, there
point?
has been one citation issued to Mr.
And,
Barsky.
and will he be called in then? Okay.
So next is Dan Rappaport. So you can either speak now or you can wait till the report. You wait? Okay. And Gay LaWurst?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your opportunity to talk again. As some of you know, I've been attending council meetings and Shade Tree Commission meetings for over 2 months now. And I've spoken up on a couple of occasions because I've become very concerned with the issues having to do with building permits and ordinances and variances and laws where tear downs are involved, especially. And actually, in a lot of ways, I don't have a dog in this fight. I have the luck to live in one of the old Stedman houses on Alexander Street in a neighborhood full of big, large, beautiful old trees and historic homes. And it's not likely to be subject to tear downs anytime soon, or at least I'm hoping so, and most of us believe so. But as a resident of Princeton, as someone who's lived and voted here and paid taxes for over 20 years, I do feel that I have a dog in the fight, because I love the town and believe in the values that we've espoused. And I feel very privileged to live here. And I also think it's my privilege as well as my duty to tell elected officials when I strongly believe we're going astray. And in the case of the tear downs, I believe we're not only going astray, but we're going contrary to a lot of the most important values that we espouse, because we're not living by them. Much of the recent conversation, as we all know here, has centered around the particular problems at 260 Hawthorne and how they affect 258, where Galena lives. And most notably, this is centered around the mature trees and the fact that there has been a lot of damage to them, and they will probably, it looks like now, have to be taken out. We don't know that yet, and we're keeping our fingers crossed and doing everything that we can do, or at least I so hope. But since this issue has been public, I wanted to say that Galena and others of us who have been following this closely and who are concerned have heard from literally dozens and dozens of people who have had similar problems over the years. And they are emailing, writing, stopping us in the streets, they're calling on the phone, and they're even knocking on Galena's door. They just come and knock on the door and say, I saw this sign, or I saw your picture, or listen, I have this story too. This is building, and it's really building fast, and it's building big. This is not one property, and it is not one builder, and it is not a fight between one builder and one owner, and it's not even something about one neighborhood. This is going on in a lot of neighborhoods, and there is a kind of energy generating here and a lot of negativity, and I don't like to see that happening. But I feel that, how can I say it? There are a lot of issues that are concerned, that are coming out. It's the issue not just of the tree removal, it's the failure to enforce ordinances or to take timely action or to address contradictions between certain ordinances. It's a problem of other things that we've heard today, and it's not only a problem of trees, and a problem of aesthetics, and a problem of the character of our neighborhoods. Now we are starting to hear stories about flooding, like Arletta Pavlovsky gave us here a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was last month. It's a problem of the loss of value of property to those who suffer the loss of trees, who suffer flooding, who have other kinds of damages. There's a question of who is going to pay for treatment of trees, who's going to pay for these damages to structures and to other kinds of property due to flooding and other kinds of problems. And apparently these are starting to develop, perhaps, it looks like it, over at 258.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I hear what you're saying. I just ask you to wrap up because there's other people who want to speak.
I am wrapping up right now. And the wrap up is we need to stop putting large homes that are too large on lots that are too small. I have been told several times that there are state laws that prohibit us from doing this and that. We can't prohibit tear downs. I'm not even saying we should. I know that we have to renew our properties. But we could certainly find a rational way to all come together and put together new properties that are affordable and sustainable and do not do damage to the neighbors who are in place. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I welcome and highly encourage you to come to the community meetings that we'll be having and the public hearings we'll be having on that very issue. So thank you for that. Caroline Cleaves.
Hi, thank you. I've come here tonight to lend my support to any effort that seeks to make Princeton a safer place for bike riders, and to applaud any resolutions that encourage children to ride their bikes to school and for all of us to enjoy riding our bikes about town. I'd like to see Princeton cultivate a sense of place where bike riding is a relaxing and enjoyable activity and not a treacherous undertaking, where bike riders can share the road with drivers without being on the receiving end of rude gestures and close calls, where children want to ride to school and their parents want to encourage them without having to worry about them being hit by cars. Now, I grew up in Princeton, and I remember a time before the town became a tourist destination. A Woolworth's and a bowling alley were the main attractions on a Nassau street that grew quiet in August when merchants closed their shops for up to 2 weeks. And yes, we walked to school in the snow. I moved back here 6 years ago with school-aged children in tow, hardly expecting nothing to have changed. But this town's traffic is a threat, and the roads are a very scary place, not merely for bike riders. Obviously, the streets have become more dangerous as Princeton becomes more crowded and as over-caffeinated commuters race through town and multitaskers and 6,000-pound SUVs careen down the street texting. But insisting that bike riders have a right to the roads with the necessary safeguards in place is clearly a possibility that must be pursued. I want to note that much hasn't changed in Princeton in 50 years, and I've lived in no town better suited to become a bike-friendly community, with a downtown shopping center, nearby public schools, centrally located community housing, and a library and a pool, all within walking or biking distance for many of us. Biking around town needs to not only be safeguarded, but encouraged. Encouraging bike riding should be a municipal priority. It results in fewer cars on the road, increased parking spaces, healthier adults, and happier children who arrive at school more alert and ready to learn. A commitment to making Princeton a safer and more enjoyable place for families, children, and everyone to ride their bike requires not only infrastructure improvement, but effective laws and enforcement of those laws. An increase in the number of people biking will necessarily make this community safer for bikes as well. I want to urge the Town Council to reflect on the value of a permanent bike lane on Wiggins as a first step to making Princeton a safer place for our children and all of us to ride our bikes. It's a shame that in a beautiful town with so much to offer, that the chronic fear of being hit by a car casts a permanent shadow over what should be a lovely way to get across town. Thank you.
So I'd like to open it up to anybody else who'd like to speak on an item that's not already on the agenda. And if you're able to stay, I would encourage, if you're here to speak about the bike lanes, to wait until the presentation. But if there's anybody else who'd like to speak on any other issue not on the agenda, I welcome you up to the mic.
Are you going to, would you like to speak or should I speak?
You can also take the mic off of the stand. It might make it easier.
Would you like to say something? Okay,
State-
Daniel,
Yeah, state your
this is
name, Marina.
Daniel, and he's going to show his sign because he's too shy to speak. The sign says, the more bike lanes, more bikes, which equals, right, Daniel, to a better earth. Show this around. So I apologize that we speak now, even though we understand it would be better after the report, but some people may not last until the end of the report. And I would like to say that this temporary bike lane, thank you for doing the experiment. I think this was a wonderful community building experiment. We participated, and you know, Ethan's shoes right there are still spray painted. And it's been a wonderful experience, and I think making that bike lane permanent would really help us personally, because we bike from Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood to Westminster for music classes. And biking with them, we've been biking since they were 3, and we bike on the sidewalk because I am really afraid to bike on the road with people this size. And for me, this is my bike route to work, so this would be really helpful. And I hope that this one becomes permanent, but I also hope that the next experiment will be on Witherspoon, because when they're going to high school, it would be really helpful to have a bike lane on Witherspoon. So thank you so much, and hopefully the report goes well and the bike lane gets to stay.
Thank you.
Ethan, do you want to show your sign? There you go. What does it say? We want a bike lane.
Marina, can you state your name? Marina, state your name. Your name? State your name.
Oh, Marina Rabina, 28 Quarry.
Thank you.
And this is Daniel Spitkovsky, 28 Quarry.
Nice job. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of public comment? All right, seeing no one, I'll close public comment, and I'm going to go back because I skipped over announcements in my zeal to move quickly through the meeting. So I'll start with Ms. Howard. Any announcements this evening?
Yes, hi. Just a reminder, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but we have an upcoming deadline, the Human Services Annual Backpack and School Supply Drive for kids K through 6th grade. Donations are due August 3rd. So that's before we have our next meeting. And the deadline to apply for supplies for a child is August 10th. You can call the Human Services Department. Thanks.
I do have a list on behalf of the rec department, but I'll just submit it to the clerk to go into the record. But I will announce the community night out will be on Tuesday, August 7th at CP Pool from 5 to 8 p.m. So please mark your calendars, and hope to see you there.
Great, thank you. Are there any announcements from staff? No? Okay. Then we'll go on to reports. And the first report tonight is on the 2017 audit. Should I turn over Sandy, or? Okay.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, it's my pleasure to be here tonight. As you may or may not know, as people in the audience may or may not know, every municipality in the state of New Jersey is required to have an annual audit. The state is looking for us to make determinations in 3 specific areas. First is on the veracity of the numbers included in your financial statements. Have your financial statements been prepared in accordance with the state statutes and regulations that you're required to follow? Are they representative of Princeton's financial condition in accordance with those statutes? And are you applying those standards consistently from year to year? The state also requires that we do an expanded scope audit that requires us to evaluate and test the internal controls over your financial transactions and reporting process, and in addition to that, to identify and test major compliance requirements, laws, regulations from not only within the municipality, but the state and federal levels that could have an impact on your financial statements in the event of non-compliance. So we perform a variety of tests and gather all kinds of evidence to the point where we're satisfied that we can issue our opinion on the financial statements and report on internal control and compliance. Those reports, the first report shows up on pages 9 through 11 of the audit document. That's our report on the financial statements themselves. It takes accountants 3 pages to say that you followed the rules, you followed them consistently, and your financial statements are a fair representation of your financial position. If I was allowed to just say that, everybody's life would be easier, but the AICPA won't let me. The second report is on pages 12 and 13. That's on the internal control structure and on compliance. Based on all the testing that we did, we found that the internal control structure for Princeton is appropriately designed for a municipality of your size, and our testing indicated that the controls that are in place are working as designed and are operating effectively. With respect to compliance, our testing found no non-compliances with laws or regulations that would have any impact on your financial statements. So essentially, those are as clean a set of reports as we are allowed to issue for a municipal government in the state of New Jersey. The reports themselves don't reflect on the quality of your financial condition, but on the fairness of it, right? As far as the quality of your financial condition, you are a AAA-rated municipality. You will remain a AAA-rated municipality based on your operating results for 2017 and your 2018 budget process. Your fund balance increased a little bit in the current fund. You turned around and used more of that fund balance to balance the 2018 budget. Within that 2018 budget and within the 2017 budget, you folks did a lot of good, and the finance department has really risen to the occasion when it comes to the final cleanup of the merger. Specifically, I'm talking about the General Capital Fund. When the 2 Princetons merged, there was duplication of projects between the township and the borough, particularly in the area of sewers. The borough would approve a project that included total costs. The township would approve a project that included their share of the cost, and in effect, you often had 150% of the total cost of a project included in your authorized debt. During 2017, everything was cleaned up in that respect. You now have no excess authorized bonds. Your net debt is your net debt. In addition to that, the 2017 budget plus the appropriation in 2018 will clear up all of the old unfunded debt. And at the end of 2018, Princeton, and this, you're the only municipal government that I can say this for right now, Princeton will have no more than 3 years' worth of authorizations outstanding as unfinanced debt, which is a very, very significant achievement, which basically it means you're authorizing projects, you're doing projects, you're funding projects, and you don't have unfunded balances hanging around on your balance sheet hurting some of the debt calculations that have to be performed annually. So that's a very positive thing. You also, in 2017, had a significant bond sale, and once again, you couldn't have timed the market any better. We are at significant, historic low interest rates still, and you financed 3 years basically worth of capital authorizations at rates between 2% and 4%, which is, quite an achievement. And the taxpayers will benefit for that over the next 20 years. With respect to comments and recommendations, we have no recommendations in this report. Basically, we did not find anything in the course of our examination that we believed had to be brought to your attention and require a corrective action plan. I did meet extensively with your business administrator and your CFO prior to tonight, and basically when it was all said and done, Mark basically wanted to know when I was going to get to the bad stuff. And unfortunately, or fortunately actually, we really didn't have any. So we think this is as clean a report as we can issue, and very impressed with the continuing professionalism that we're seeing in the finance department.
Thank you, Bob. And I forgot to introduce you at the beginning. So this is Bob Morrison, who's our auditor. Yes, thank you. And I want to congratulate and thank Sandy Webb and Mark DeShiel for all the hard work on this, and also members of our Citizens Finance Advisory Committee who've really pushed to clean up the extra deadlines out there. So we're thankful for everybody for their work, and it's always great to get, and I think this is our second year in a row to have an audit with no comment. So thank you to both of you. Anybody else? Comments?
I just want to thank the finance. They do an outstanding job. Particularly, I wanted to thank our CFO, Sandy Webb. Just a tremendous job she's been doing over the last couple of years. So thank you.
Yeah, and I just have to point out, because I mentioned this to your management, my staff loves to come here because of the cooperation they get, the pleasantness of everybody they have to work with. This is the easiest client I have to staff the job for. I have some other jobs where people groan when I put them on the job. Everybody thanks me when I put them on the Princeton job.
Excellent. Well, I hope you're enjoying the great restaurants and shopping too while you're here.
And maybe I'll be able to bike here next time.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. On point. All right.
If there are any questions that you think of after tonight, by the way, feel free to give me a call. I love my job and I love talking about my job. So should you have a question, feel free to call.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, so we have a resolution 18258, resolution accepting the 2017 audit and group affidavit.
I move that resolution.
Moved by Ms. Howard.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we come to the presentation on the Beta Bike Lane. So I'd like to invite up Deanna Stockton.
And I'm going to join Deanna at the table.
And Councilman Quinn. Do you guys have slides? Should we turn on our screens here? Okay. And the way this will work, just structurally, is Deanna and Tim will give a presentation If there's questions from who's left of council, we'll ask questions. And then we'll open it up for public comment, and then we'll bring it back to council to talk about next steps.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to be here with Deanna Stockton. And before we begin, I want to recognize the leadership and members of the Princeton Bike Advisory Committee, Lisa Sarisol, Lori Harmon, and all members of PBAC. Would you please stand and be recognized? And anyone who volunteered to help out with a beta bike lane, including Ethan, who's, I hope you limit your spray painting only to road surfaces for betas. So thank you to all the volunteers. Beta bike lane, we can go to the next slide, was a demonstration about what we could do as a municipality to make a key east-west corridor in Princeton safe and usable for all modes of transportation. Bike lanes don't just benefit bicyclists. They're not a gift to cyclists. They're a gift to the entire street. They improve a street for pedestrians by hopefully getting bikes off the sidewalk, and for cars in putting cyclists in positions where they're seen by traffic, and obviously for cyclists to have them feel more secure. And the data that we gathered through survey seems to bear that out. So if we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The typical configuration on Wiggins and Hamilton, the parking's on the right. The sharrows indicate to drivers that this is a heavily trafficked by cyclists. Some residents think that that indicates that these are bike lanes when they are not. So what we did with Beta Bike Lane for just around $5,000 and a lot of sweat equity by volunteers was to tape over the center line and reconfigure the road with two 10-foot traffic lanes and two 5-foot bike lanes, and no improvements to the sidewalks. If we could go to this photo I took as I was driving to work one morning. This is about 8:05 a.m. on the Tuesday after the installation, and there were no cars behind me at the time, and so I stopped and pulled my camera out really fast. Please don't tell the police department, and took a photo. This is a complete street by my definition. On the right, we have someone walking their dog on the sidewalk. In the bike lane, we have a mother who's towing a trailer with some toddlers, and we have 2 lanes of traffic staying within the lanes. You can see the blacked out center line to the center of the photo that gives you an idea of what we did. Without the bike lane, that cyclist with her trailer would have been competing for what's a pretty narrow sidewalk on Hamilton with that pooch and that pedestrian. And we heard again and again in the outreach that we did in the neighborhood, the mayor and I and members of PBAC walked the route of the bike lane and knocked on doors to give people a heads up that this was happening. And we heard again and again from residents who wanted a way to get cyclists off of the sidewalk and for them to ride in the street. And yet our data done by Parsons Brinkerhoff shows that cyclists don't feel safe on that road without dedicated lanes. So Deanna is going to cover the results of the data. And again, we live in a town full of scientists and mathematicians, and we're acknowledging that this was a small sample size, 10 days. It was a sample size that allowed us to take offline, 36 parking spaces were taken offline for 10 days. 17 of those parking spaces were 20-hour parking spaces. And so with that disclaimer, Deanna's going to present the data.
The Bike Advisory Committee were able to secure assistance from the DVRPC to put in bicycle and pedestrian counters for 3-week periods, a week before the trial, during the Beta Bike Lane, and then after the Beta Bike Lane. We also had Princeton Police Department install the speed radar signs, which also gathered data about the volume and the speeds of the motoring public. So those were the 2 tools that we used to gather the data before you. As Tim mentioned, this was a very small sample size. We do acknowledge it was a small length of a project. It was only about a half a mile of roadway that was part of this trial. But we see just in that small area and that small amount of time that there was more than double increase in the bicycles. So we went from 42 to 94 bicycles during that period of time. The pedestrians in that area dropped slightly, but the motoring public stayed pretty consistent as well. In regards to the speed data, in general, the speeds stayed somewhat the same. There was an increase in the average peak speed and in the average daily 50th percentile speed. One thing that we also noted in general overall is that the percentage of violators at this time went up during the Beta Bike Lane. And the sense is that occurred because there was less friction from the parked cars. Typically, especially that eastbound traffic is operating at a slightly lower speed because of the parked cars, and when you remove that, then they feel that there's a little less friction and they can operate at a higher speed.
So we did a survey and had hundreds of responses to the survey. It was online, it was publicized in local media, and I call attention to 2 photos before we go over the survey results. This is a photo that I shot right near Sylvia Beach Way. This is a young person who's heading toward the school who realized that he had a bike lane that he could ride on. So he got off the sidewalk where he was not in competition with that car that was sticking out at the intersection, and he would be better able to be seen by traffic. And again, I think some of the pedestrian counts going down were probably counted as bicyclists who opted for the dedicated bike lane instead of the sidewalk. The next one is, this is a Princeton High School student who is riding in a secure bike lane to Princeton Public Library from school. This was shot around 3:30 on a Friday afternoon. You can see the demographics of the 432 respondents split equally among gender, a wide range of age, and a wide range of bike ridership. Race was predominantly white, and we can go to the next slide. So where do you ride on Hamilton and Wiggins, we ask? And before the bike lane pilot, 44% rode on the sidewalk and 56% rode in the street, on the street. During the bike lane project, that number soared to 89% who were riding in a dedicated bike lane, whereas 11% opted to remain on the sidewalk. So how safe did riders feel? 23% felt safe before the before BBL, and 61% felt unsafe. That flipped when we installed the temporary bike lanes. 69% felt safe, and 12% felt unsafe. The numbers were unchanged for pedestrians, and some of the comments were ranged from speeding cars are too close to the sidewalk without the bike lanes, parked cars make it dangerous to get in and out of driveways, and cyclists are evil was one of the survey responses. And you can see removing parked cars increased visibility and safety. Removing parked cars decreases safety. So there didn't seem to be unanimity there. And of course, the eternal question, where is my free parking space? So the grade of the respondents was overwhelmingly positive. 49.5% loved the Beta bike lane, and 15% liked them, and 23% did not like them. And that corresponds with the, I think we missed a slide. It corresponded with the whether people, how frequently they rode. So the people who said that they didn't like the bike lanes were less likely to have ridden. We inserted a little social comments here. Honestly, never thought I'd see this day in Princeton. Been riding up and down just because I can. And you can see the variety of comments. Love it. Can we keep it? I felt so much safer cycling on Wiggins when I had my own designated space. Todd Pagel is a councilman in Metuchen, was following, we were being followed pretty closely by advocates in Metuchen and in Hoboken, who were very interested in our beta and applauded our efforts. Princeton Transportation and Parking also gave us a couple of shout outs, and people felt that it was a safer street for pedestrians. So in terms of next steps, Deanna's going to discuss where we go from here.
Thank you, Tim. So throughout this process of talking about a beta bike lane and establishing bike lanes on Hamilton, the big questions are, well, what's the big data to prove that this is a success? And our whole point of the beta bike lane was, let's try it and see what happens. You know, see if we're successful and what happens and what's the fallout from it. We were successful. It was a safe operation. There were no reported crashes or collisions between bicyclists, pedestrians, and vehicles. We do have some data that we've presented to you. What we've given you is a small piece of it. We have a lot more data, but in the interest of time, we didn't provide that as part of the presentation. But from an engineering standpoint, we need to look at it in a systematic fashion at this point. We need to gather that data and take a look at the long-term implications of making such a change to the roadway, removing the parking, and establishing bike lanes. I know sometime in the process there were questions of, well, should it just be bike lanes? Should they be buffered bike lanes, you know, separated from the traffic? What's our speed of traffic? What's our volume of traffic? And those are all pieces that get pulled into those next steps. And so what, as a municipal engineer, I'm recommending is that we now conduct an engineering study of the corridor, and we'd actually look at a longer corridor than the Beta bike lane. It would actually go from Bayard Lane to Harrison Street. I've provided up at the top of the page a little bit of the bike mobility plan and what they envision for the corridor, and you'll see that not only is there bike lane improvements, but they're also looking at intersection improvements. So they're looking at potentially roundabouts and enhanced crosswalks. And so those pieces would all be tied in, because this would be a complete street study. We would look at how does the roadway function for all users, as well as the adjacent neighbors, those private property owners along the corridor. We do have different characteristics of development along that stretch of roadway within those limits. And so it would behoove all of us to really take a look at each piece of it and determine if this overall plan of a beta bike lane, of the bidirectional bike lanes, is the best use of this right-of-way. Our preliminary beta bike lane is pointing us to, yes, this is the right way to go, but for our business community, for our residents, for the visitors to town, I'm just recommending we do the study. And so what I've provided on this listing are some of the things that would be looked at. We have 2 traffic signals within the corridor. What do we do at those locations? We have turn lanes right now. Do we need to make modifications? We're not going to push out the intersections, especially at Witherspoon Street. So we need to look at how does that intersection function now. If we make changes, what's the impact of that change? And we need to look at the parking study and the parking system improvements that we're making this fall to see how does that work in with that on-street parking that will be lost. How can we build in pieces into the bike parking the Princeton parking program to compensate for that loss? And then just looking at the bicycle level of stress. Is this going to be the best fit for the corridor for what the goals are? Getting the kids off of the sidewalks into bike lanes. Have we made enough trade-offs, the compromises? Is it going to fit for everybody's? Not everybody will win a whole piece of the pie, but if we can come out where everybody feels like they got a little bit, I think we'll be successful in that. And so that's why we need to take this systematic review of all of these pieces of the data before we move ahead.
I think that Beta Bike Lane was a demonstration of what a phrase that I coined called practical urbanism. So right now in transportation circles, there's a hot thing called tactical urbanism, which is you go out at 4 in the morning with a bunch of cones and you put a bike lane up where there wasn't a bike lane, and you don't tell anyone, you just kind of do it. We took what I think is a more practical approach with our professionals, with the police department, and everyone was willing to go along, and we found a way to not make sort of permanent, we didn't black out the center line with paint. We used removable temporary, you can still see the remnants of the Beta Bike Lane if you're driving on that, especially that spray chalk lasted far longer than anyone anticipated. So again, it also was, we didn't view this experiment as a panacea. We didn't think that every rider would get off the sidewalk. We didn't think that there would be peace and harmony in the valley, and that everyone would have a delightful time. But I think that there was great importance in providing a way for people to visualize that wasn't just a chart. So you got to see it in action, and the people, and it was a wonderful community building exercise as well. Members of council and the mayor were out there putting tape down, and so anyway, I think you want to open it up to questions, and I'll go back up on the dais because I'm uncomfortable having my back to the audience.
All right, thank you.
Don't want to be disrespectful.
I want to thank both of you, especially I want to thank Tim for your leadership on this, and Deanna and the engineering department, and members of PBAC. And I think this is, as has been said, it was a great idea to just put it out there, because I think one of the great things about that is we all know what we're talking about, and we can all have the discussion about the same thing, as opposed to something that's just written on the paper and people are theorizing about what it's going to be like. So thank you for pushing to do the test, and I want to thank the members of the Bike Advisory Committee were really instrumental in coming up with creative ways to do this cheaply. So thank you for that creativity. I don't know if we would have come up with the idea of duct tape on our own. So, so I'd like to open it up if there's any questions from council or comments before we hear from the public.
Just great work. I just want to say great work. Thank you for I know there was a lot of work involved in that and many members of our community. And it's more of a comment, not a question. But I know in your presentation, you were looking at ways how we get our kids safely to and from school. I would also ask that going forward, as you look at safe routes, that you also consider the members of our community for who biking is their only mode of transportation. So if we can also look at the routes for those members of our community that need to get to and from work.
Ms. Howard?
Yeah, I'm thank you too to Tim for his incredible persistence on this. You had me out there. I take some responsibility for that spray chalk. Ethan and I did all those bikes. Are those the ones that are still there? Yeah, we did that. So, and what I loved was how practical and thoughtful you were about this. And I'm particularly excited now that Leticia raised this. Deanna, if you're going to look at intersection modifications, I mean, it's going to be really interesting this fall when we have new start times for the schools. It just occurred to us this week that JW and the high schools start 4 minutes from each other, which has never been the case. So, yeah, that's going to be fun at some of those intersections, right? So, this opportunity to rethink all of these in a really holistic, smart way, and from a planning perspective is great. And I'll just comment too that when I was out there that day helping, I was amazed at how many people came out and volunteered on a hot day. And the reaction from everybody who walked or biked by, and the people who lived on the street, who came out and said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, this is really interesting." So it's really been a great process. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. All right, so I know there's probably going to be some more questions and comments from council, but I'd like to open it up because there's so many people here tonight. So could you just raise your hand if you'd like to speak on the bike lanes? Okay. So if you'd like to speak, I invite you to come up to the microphone and line up. And if you can just make sure you state your name for the record. Give your comments. There are quite a few people who'd like to speak, so we're going to ask that if you can try to keep your remarks to 3 minutes so that everybody gets a chance to be heard. That would be terrific. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor and councilman, council people. My name is Andrew Leifer. I live on Jefferson Road, and I'm here to speak in strong favor of making the Beta bike lane permanent.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You can hold the microphone too, if that's easier, so we can hear you.
Thanks. I'm Andrew Leifer. I live on Jefferson Road, and I want to thank you for the Beta bike lane experiment, and I'm here to speak in strong favor of making it permanent. I bicycle daily to my job at the university and to bring my 3-year-old son to daycare. He rides in a seat on the back. And in its current state, and in the state before the bike lane, I'm not comfortable bicycling with my son on Wiggins Street because it feels very unsafe. Instead, if I'm to take my son to the library or Jazam's or Milk and Cookies, we walk or he rides a scooter. And even on foot, we try to avoid Wiggins, especially the north side, because even on the sidewalk, there's no buffer between the sidewalk and oncoming traffic. And I particularly worry that he's just one slip away from oncoming traffic. But when the Beta bike lane arrived, it was fantastic, and it dramatically improved my ability to get to the business district and the library. On foot, there was now a buffer between the sidewalk and oncoming traffic that made it safer for my 3-year-old to ride his scooter. On my bike, I rode. Now I could take the Wiggins. I adjusted my route. It's actually more convenient for me to get where I'm going. I rode there every day. And as a driver, it felt to me that it was safer and roomier without having to worry about dodging occasionally parked cars. The bike lane made it easier for me and my family to get into the business district on bicycle and on foot. Making Princeton bicycle friendly is good for the town and good for the environment. Thank you for the experiment. Please make it permanent. Please don't overthink it and don't let it get killed as part of a bigger study. Keep the bike lane, and as Councilman Fraga mentioned, let's bring them to all of our neighborhoods. The more the better. Thank you.
My name is Bob Altman. I'm the chair of the Complete Streets Committee, but I cannot speak for them because we have not seen this report yet. We'll see it in a couple of weeks. I would like to compliment the PBAC on the work. It's a spectacular job. As the gentleman before me, I hope that we can make the beta lanes permanent. And I'd also like to suggest that, thinking of the next to last slide, if we're going to do a study of future extensions of the bike lanes, I'd like to suggest that we not stop at Harrison, but that we go to Snowden and let the study take us back to where we were 3 or 4 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank the council for making these sort of projects, because this is exactly what makes Princeton so special. I just have a question in regards to educating the Latino community. I just have a question in regards to, can you hear me? Oh, Juan Polanco from Princeton Community Village. I just have a question in regards to educating the Latino community who's living in Witherspoon, and some of them who might not necessarily speak English and might not be educated in regards to biking on the street. Are there any sort of pamphlets or things in Spanish that might educate the Latino community who live in Witherspoon, and that tends also to be the community that tends to be biking the most on Witherspoon? Thank you.
Thank you. And I think there were versions of the bike map made in Spanish at some point. Is that right? I think so, but I don't know if they're still there. So I think we're due for a reprinting of those, but that's a good point. And it has some safety information on there.
Thank you.
And our survey was available in Spanish thanks to Liliana, who's new to the bike committee and who's volunteered to do a lot of translation for us. So, which we recognize, as Councilwoman Fraga said, that many members of the community who are using bikes for work transportation are native speakers of Spanish, and so we're committed to providing those materials.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peregrine Sean Jones, and I live in Princeton on Moran Avenue, 1 block from Hamilton Avenue. I ride my bike for grocery shopping, especially for shopping downtown, and for general transport. I ride at least 5 times a week in the summer and at least 3 times a week in the winter. I want to say that in general, I feel that bike riding on Hamilton Avenue and Wiggins Street is dangerous. I think the cars usually drive 10% over the speed limit, and they often do not give bikes enough space when they pass them. However, during the beta bike lane experiment, I used these streets several times and felt very safe. I think just the presence of a striped bike lane allows traffic to move in an orderly way and limits dangerous car maneuvers like cars tailgating bikes too close or speeding up and passing and crossing into the oncoming traffic lane. And I want to please request to make these bike lanes permanent. And I feel that creating better bike routes to downtown will eventually increase the vitality and commercial success of downtown. And I also want to say thank you very much for doing this experiment. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary LaPlaca, and I live right on Hamilton Avenue, the area in which you're talking about. And I'm coming with kind of a different viewpoint, a very personal one, because I live there, and I've lived there for 21 years, and I've had children go to the Princeton school system. And I did meet the mayor and some representatives, and I was thankful that they came around and talked to us personally. And I did spend some time talking to them about my concerns, and I didn't necessarily, and I think the engineer, I met you, you were lovely, thank you, but I didn't necessarily see any of what I spoke about. And my neighbors aren't here, but a lot of us are a little bit concerned. I mean, as a homeowner, having the right to park is important. It's why we bought our home. It's one of the things that we enjoy. I don't see, I mean, I can only share my personal experience. I don't see a lot of bike riders. I mean, you know, in proportion to the traffic. You know, 94 is, I guess, a substantial number, but to make major changes like that, I also I'm concerned that, you know, Princeton's growing, it's building, and I do care about people having parking. I mean, even though I live there and it affects my life, I think that having that kind of affordable parking is important. Also, you know, the Princeton High School, I'm a teacher myself, I drive to another school district, and when I'm going through that intersection on Moore, where all the cars and all the students are crossing at the crossing guard, I'm not seeing a lot of bikes. You know, a lot of cars, a lot of parents driving kids to school, and a lot of walkers. So I do have some concerns about, you know, we have people come to our homes, we have work done, and where do people park? Are we going to be parking all the way on Moore? Are we going to be having to walk all the way to Walnut? I mean, this would change our lifestyle too, and certainly the traffic is a concern. I have never felt a problem with walking on the sidewalk and being concerned about bike riders hitting me. Never, ever. Raised 3 children there, never. That was never a concern. I've never felt uncomfortable about that. So some of my experiences are not the same as everyone. I mean, I'm not an avid bike rider, so I do say that, but I'm out and living there every day. So I think it's important also to take in concern like our homes and our conveniences, and where would people come to park if they needed work to do on your home. And most of the houses on Hamilton have anywhere from 3 to 5 bedrooms. So you have older children with cars, so now you've got 4 cars in your park. So these are some of the things that, you know, as a Princetonian, as a taxpayer, you know, I would like you to consider that in your plan. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, all of you, for all of your hard work in all the domains. This is the bike lane. Denise Pratico, 25 Hamilton Avenue, actually across the street from Mary. And I'm kind of in the middle. I understand Mary's plight because she has a large family. She has an ill husband. There are people on our street who get services where the people come and park there so they can give the services. And it's you know, it's going to be tricky to lose that. Some of the people that are served by the parking are the high school students because there's not a lot of parking at the high school. Others are hourly wage workers in downtown, and we know because we have to give them jumps when their car battery dies. And they're not wealthy people, or they would get a good parking spot out of the rain. These are kids that, not all kids, but people that need the parking. And we have in front of our block, we have the all-day parking. The brochure that was printed suggested that both blocks, Wiggins and Hamilton, were every 2 hours move the car, and that's not necessarily true. As lucky taxpayers of that block, we also sometimes can call the police in the evening just to give our address and the make and model of a car that has to be out overnight, and that would disappear. So I'm not the only one. There are people who just moved in, who bought their houses because it was a good block to be able to have the car out and let somebody else come in the driveway. But it's for the greater good. It's just that I'm not seeing the numbers, that 92 per day. I don't know where it came from, because when I was looking out the window or the door, I was counting 6, sometimes 8 a day. But you know, I was away a lot, so I didn't even get a chance to do the survey. But is it like build it and they will come? And then hopefully in the wintertime, those other 6 months when it's not nice to ride bikes, will there be a lot of bike traffic? So what I want to say in closing, because I know my time's up, is that if the people on Hamilton and Wiggins, let's say, lose stuff because it's not going to come out 50-50, would you please give them law enforcement on the street to manage the speed? First time we've ever seen a speed machine was out because of the beta lanes, not because we asked for that. We need that law enforcement for the 25, or move it to 20 and see if you can get 25. Because we get 65 miles an hour, 45, 50, you wouldn't believe it. And it starts around 6 in the morning and it goes until like 7 at night. Saturdays and Sundays, the bicyclists can take over the whole street. You don't need better lanes. That's what we need, company or services. So just think about everything. And, I want safety for all. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, I'm Joshua Zinder. I live at 142 Moore Street.
I don't think the mic's picking you
It's
up.
not picking me up? Okay, hello, I'm Joshua Zinder. I live at 142 Moore Street, and I work at 20 Nassau Street. And I'm on this section of road every day, at least twice a day. And during the study, I did ride my bike on it, and I ride my bike. I would say I'm not an avid rider, I'm a periodic rider. I definitely experienced the beta lanes a number of different ways. And, I believe that there's not enough information to make this permanent. And I am very encouraged that there's going to be further study. And I think that there's some data that was missing from the analysis. The spots that are being taken away, how are they currently used? How often are they used? And what's their, the people who are using them, what they're using them for. Are they people on the street? Are they people shopping in town? What is that? I know that a number of employees will park there and take that extra walk into town, and they'll park there during the day. And I would encourage the municipality that if the spots are lost in the end, that they should be replaced elsewhere. I also think that after driving back and forth on this road during the study, I'm really surprised that there were no accidents. I had a number of incidents where people just made random left turns out in front of me off of the bike lanes. And because I was driving the speed limit, I could avoid them. But I think that a significant amount of effort in Princeton needs to be spent on bike education and having bicyclists understanding what the rules are and where they're allowed to ride and where not to ride. And the most basic thing, how to signal that you're making a turn so that somebody who's in another vehicle or on another bike can know that you're about to turn in front of you. I would also encourage that as part of this bike study, that bike parking be seriously looked at throughout town. I'd be curious how the test next to the library has been doing. I've noticed that it seems to be loaded up with bikes all the time. And I'm curious if those are bikes that are been parked there once and just left there, or if they're actually changing over. And if they are, it's an indication that we have to provide an end to our destination for all these bike riders. And again, I would just like to say that I'm encouraged to hear that there's going to be further study, and I think that it needs to be looked at in many different ways, and it has potential. Last thing I would like to say is that there are other forms of the bike lanes, putting them both on one side versus splitting them on either side, and I'd be curious how other municipalities have had success with that versus what we structured that we had. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Kim. I live on Van Devender, and my uses of the Wiggins and that stretch of road is more coming from either going to shopping at the shopping center or recreationally to get in and out of town for longer bike rides. And I'd consider myself more of a confident cyclist, so I will use the road whether or not there are bike lanes. But at the same time, with the sharrows, as people have said, I don't think if you added the question to the survey, do you know what a sharrow is? I think there'd be a small percentage that knew what it is. So when I'm riding my bike, I'll be taking the entire lane, and cars will be behind me, maybe impatient, trying to get around, because that's the safest thing for me. I don't want somebody to run into me or pass too closely. I can't be too close to a door. A door is going to open and hit me or push me into the traffic, and a car is going to run me over, so it's not safe really to bike, even the way it is now. And I'd say we're all on a bike. If there's not a bike lane and you have your own dedicated space, we're closer to one text or phone call away from statistics and fatalities, and that's a concern that I have whenever I ride my bike. So after, that was my before, but after the experience, I've used the lane to get in and out of town and around town, and I did feel a lot safer. And to echo what other supporters have said in strong favor of making it permanent, don't think too much about it or overthink it, and encourage going all the way to Snowden, and what Councilwoman Fraga said about all users and throughout the town. I also walk and run, and there is competing uses on the sidewalk, which makes it difficult to do those things, which is lower friction when there's a bike lane for everybody. And in terms of speeds of drivers and bicyclists, like I said, if I'm riding my bike, if there's no bike lane, people are, when they're riding their bikes, they might be taking more of the lane. Cars have to go a little slower to get around. So it's possible that cars are going faster when there's a bike lane because now they don't have to wait for the car. So I'm impressed by the statistics also of the small survey of doubling the amount of daily trips. And so thank everybody for their efforts and encourage more of this in the future. Thanks.
Hello. Molly Jones. I'm a Hamilton Avenue resident and Executive Director of Sustainable Princeton. I just wanted to bring up a couple of points that haven't been voiced so far. The Climate Action Plan. You know, deep work is going into it. Your fellow councilman, David Cohen, is working very hard. The Climate Action Plan, through our greenhouse gas inventory, has told us that approximately 1/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions here in Princeton come from transportation. The Beta Bike Lane is a phenomenal example of what can be done to help impact our emissions here. We need to get people out of their single-person driven vehicles. We need to make them feel safe to pursue these alternate modes of transportation. Secondly, I wanted to just chat for a moment, share about all of this from the perspective of our businesses. I greatly understand that the knee-jerk reaction of our businesses is that taking parking away will be detrimental to sales. But I want to encourage you that many studies have been done from other communities across the country, across the globe, looking at this challenge of what happens when you bring in bike lanes. And truly, while the results can vary from place to place, what they're seeing, or what I have read, is that for many of the services that we have in our downtown area, such as restaurants, convenience services, sales go actually up by having bikers. It is true that grocery stores have seen a decline of sales from bikers versus cars, because of course it's harder to carry a load of groceries on your bike. More work could definitely be done, but I just want to encourage all of our businesses not to fear that this does not mean that we will necessarily have less individuals here in our community. But it will hopefully, in fact, support our economic vitality. If we look at communities of tomorrow, 21st century communities that are bringing in the millennials, they are very much supporting the biking, walking culture, car sharing culture that these next generations are very much embracing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put it up here. Hi. There we go. I'm a double grandparent this month. I've welcomed two baby. I know I saw you last month, and in that interim, I've got a granddaughter and a grandson. So, and I had the chance to read the bike report. And I've had conversations with Liz after my initial, pardon me? Hold on to it. Oh, Jack Morrison, Princeton Merchants Association. And I had the chance, actually, I came in and talked to Liz the next day because I've said before I'm a biker. I've worked and lived in town for 30 odd years. We've owned Nassau Street Seafood for 38 years now. A lot of my employees bike. And I also understand, and I hope you all, I think we've now taken a little notice as to the parking activity that occurs along those 29, and Tim, you said it's 36 spots?
So just to clarify, 36 was the total number of spaces that were taken offline.
moved.
17 of those, and Ms. Lopaka was correct that in the brochure, or I'm not Mrs. Lopaka, but another speaker was correct that in the brochure we said that they were all 2-hour spaces, and they weren't.
Okay, but they're all day too.
There's 17.
So they are used. So again, they're unaware of any beta tests. They know that they couldn't park there for a little while, and they're really, I guess, employees. I don't know who they are, and I think it's important that we do find out who they are. But I wanted to talk about the bigger picture. I'm happy to hear that as parents, I raised 2 children here, that we're thinking of making safe corridors for our kids to get to school. And I had the opportunity when I sold my house, I've lived in the western section and I lived over in the Littlebrook section. Whenever I would take my daughter to school, I would urge her to go down through the community park area. We had a crossing guard down at the bottom of 206. Never in my wildest dreams would I tell her to go to the YMCA 206 intersection. It's just cars are flying all over the place. It's not a safe gateway, so to speak, down onto Hamilton-Wiggins, the Wiggins corridor. Nor, when I lived on Snowden, would I ever think of going down to that little narrow, tight intersection of Harrison and Hamilton. I would always use Franklin and sort of just cut back and have a nice, easy ride. You know, there's a lot of less traffic, and I would encourage us, as I've talked to Liz about it, and I know that the bike people have looked at it also, to create a wonderful network of connecting the community through the safer streets that gets them to the John Witherspoon School, gets them to the high school, gets them to CP, gets to use all these, and then find a way to have a safe gateway into Princeton. You know, we've talked about can I say it? Okay. But there are some ideas out there that we'd like to explore. And again, being a biker, the Merchants Association supports all this. Our payroll alone is about $300 million into the community. We believe in people, we believe in you, we believe in, and I hope you believe in us. And we'd like to see something that we could all collectively get together that would be a great benefit and not a detriment. Thank you.
I'm Lisa Sariasol. I'm the chair of the Bike Advisory Committee, but I'm here tonight as an individual, as a parent of a student at JW, and a concerned adult watching the students and everybody really, but my focus has been on the bike committee for several years, a program known as Safe Routes to School. It started over at Johnson Park, and we there arranged for over 300 children to walk or bicycle to school several times a year, and they had to either cross Rosedale or walk along Rosedale. We did this with the cooperation of the police, the engineering department, the school, the transportation of the school district, the superintendent, the mayor, Mr. Quinn, Ms. Fraga. a lot of people have been involved in this. As I got into the John Witherspoon community, I realized that education of the students really needed to be upped as far as bicycling and pedestrians. So I have organized over the past 2 years for the Greater Mercer TMA, Transportation Management Association, to come in and give lectures about bicycle and pedestrian safety. In the past year, we've covered in both John Witherspoon and the high school over 800 students. This was arranged in connection with the health teachers, the gym teachers, and the driver's ed teachers. They are all so thoroughly on board with this education program that they want it to continue year upon year. I look forward to doing that with them and making it, hopefully, part of the standard curriculum of the school district. As far as students riding to school, this was part of what we considered when we looked at the bike mobility plan and made the proposal for the network, because as most of us know, once you get to high school, there is no bus service for anyone within a roughly 2.5-mile radius of the high school. That means that if you're trying to reduce the number of cars on the street, you need to make bike lanes available to those students so that they can get to school on some other means of transport other than their parents driving them or they driving themselves and then having to find parking. So the whole concept of getting kids on bikes, which is very healthy anyway, is well thought through in our committee, and we hope that there are further studies that will go into extending the bike lane and making it a connecting route from the center of town. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Polly Strauss, and I live at 147 Poe Road. I'm here with my husband, Rick, because we ride a tandem bike into town. It's a bicycle for two. It attracts a lot of attention, and so we're somewhat unofficial ambassadors for Princeton, and very happy to be in that role because we love Princeton. And I want to encourage you to go ahead with these bike lane plans, because as I've been hearing the plans and the dreams tonight, I truly think that this would be the answer for not only giving us a better chance of surviving getting into town to shop and use the restaurants, but I actually think, and I'll speak for me personally, I think it would really be the key to my increased fitness. And so I really ask you, I can see going back and forth daily, if not more than once a day, and so I really hope you'll consider it. The reason I will just say that we do take the tandem bike is because I'm too scared right now to ride a bike on my own into town. So I really hope you'll do it, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Surinder Sharma, 237 Christopher Drive. First of all, congratulations, Mayor and the Council, for an excellent audit report. I think the whole staff deserves that. And talking about the staff, I also like to acknowledge Deanna Stockton, who I had the pleasure of working with for many, many years. What a wonderful engineer, dedicated, and I'd like to acknowledge that, and thank you for all your hard work. And also thank you for a wonderful report that Tim Quinn and Deanna Stockton presented. However, I'd like to add a couple of things to that. Two topics. First of all, what the results were presented were really descriptive statistics. Means they're like averages and means and so forth. They're really not statistical analysis. They're not quantitative analysis. And what I mean is that in order to do really a study whether that data could be extrapolated over to the bigger population, we need to do some results on that, more analysis on that. When I say quantitative statistical analysis, is that take a look at the number of questions that you have. First, find if you have a good sample. What does the sample data included? Was it all mostly bicyclists, or was it a good combination of the residents in that community who live on that corridor? So you have to kind of look at, was there any bias to the data? I'm for bicyclists. I want our town to be more bicycler friendly and pedestrian friendly. I'm all for that. But I'm also want to caution, which is the mayor has been, saying that we need to have vision zero, means we don't want any death in our town because of transportation, because of the car accident. And it's not like whenever you have bicycles and the cars sharing a road, there's a probability, and a good probability, that some accident will happen. So we need to look at some alternative means. We have these sidewalks on both sides. Is it possible to make one of these sidewalks bicycle lane and the other side of the road sidewalk for the pedestrians, and keep the cars where they belong? So again, I'd like you to kind of look at it, many other factors instead of just looking at the descriptive statistics. It looks great. And I also applaud that there are more studies to be done, and I looked at what has been presented. And again, I'm speaking as a resident, not as a part of the CSC committee. I know my chair, Bob Altman, is here, and we will look at this data at our committee. But I like to kind of make sure that whatever decision we make is based on evidence-based and real statistics data and analysis. And when I say statistical analysis, this is more than just looking at the descriptors. Descriptors is what you presented today, not the statistical analysis, which is what it means is when you have a sample, can you take that sample and extrapolate to the overall population and make decisions? So I'd like you to kind of make sure that we do that. And we have people in the community, and I'm a pretty good statistician myself. I know how to do the analysis. So if you give us the raw data, we can take a look at it. We'll be able to help you to do these analysis. So please, do the right things. Again, there have been many, many good suggestions. I'd like you to kind of look at those.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Mia Sachs, Terhune Road. Maybe it was a mistake to do a study, because I don't think this is complicated. I don't think, Surinder, I have the utmost respect for your statistical analysis, but this is not complicated. It's a no-brainer. There's one place for kids to get from school to the library and to downtown. That's just the construction of the town. And being part of a community means making compromises. We all have to make compromises, and some people may have to give up a few parking spaces, but when you juxtapose that against the safety of hundreds of children being able to get back and forth between school and home, I think it's an ethical responsibility of the council to make this a permanent, safe space for all residents who don't have access to a car or who want to bike for sustainability reasons or health reasons or whatever. I just wanted to say that I have done a lot of biking in New York, and I find it, I feel much safer, and I don't know if there's data to show, but I do think it's safer to ride in a bike lane that has a slight protective side barrier. Anyway, I urge you to pass this and not to get too bogged down in studies, because I don't think it's that complicated.
Hi, ooh, that's loud. Fran McManus. So I'm a resident of the town. I live off Mountain Avenue. We also own a commercial building on Harrison Street. And I've been biking in town since 1972. So I have to thank you so much for bringing biking into the public eye and really encouraging more biking in town, because I think the more people on the street, the more people cycling on the street, the more motorists are going to start to notice cyclists, and also other people are going to be encouraged to get out and ride. I also have run the Whole Earth Center's Random Acts of Community for the last 13 years, so we've given the merchants this year, I think there were 28 merchants involved. We gave out about $2,000 in gift cards to cyclists. So over the 13 years, I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars to spend, but I get to be Ed McMahon once a year. I'm really excited about that. Well, having bike routes in town, absolutely. I did take the Beta route. I only took it once. I didn't feel particularly safe. I agree that road is the bypass road for Nassau Street for people, and they drive way too fast on that road. So I found it a little unnerving. Maybe over time I'd feel a little bit better about it, but I would absolutely please implore you to find out who is parking in those spaces, and to particularly down by the Choir College, I assume those are employees of downtown businesses. You have to be thinking about where they're going to park, because I know, working for the Whole Earth Center for 40 years, parking for our employees is really important. If you make them pay to park, then you're going to have to add to their hourly wages. Will the town residents support that? I mean, I think these are just very important considerations that you need to be aware of. And thank you again.
Hi, just a Steve Hiltner on Harrison Street, where there's no parking and no bike lanes yet. I just wanted to say that my hat's off to Tim for actually making, I know how hard it is to bring about change in this town, and you actually made it change for like 2 weeks, and that's amazing. You know, you have to go through plans and consultants and studies and what, blah, 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 blah. So that was thrilling, and I did feel like I actually, as a bicyclist, belonged somewhere, which was an amazing feeling. And because we're basically refugees, where are you going to put the refugees? There's all these like bicyclists, where are we going to put them? That's the feeling. You know, I'm trying to stay out of everybody's way when I'm on a bicycle. But it's a great way to get around, and that was fantastic to actually have a place that you feel like you're home. And so that was good. The other thing is leaves. If you can containerize leaves in nice big roll carts. Wanted to get that in there. That'll be a really nice combination. Thank you.
Oh, hi, Adam Bierman, Grover Avenue, longtime resident. Growing up, we were free-ranging kids, and we just went on our bikes. And I like the fact, I know it's complicated, but I like the fact that we're going to go back to bikes. And I think we're starting it right now. Who knows, in 20 years, we might see a paradigm shift, and we can kind of be like Amsterdam. And I agree with what you said about millennials. They want to ride their bikes. So I think we're heading in the right direction. This is great, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lori Harmon from Spruce Street, and I'm also vice chair of the bicycle committee, but speaking as a resident in town and an avid cyclist. I would like to thank Mayor Lempert, Princeton Council, for giving us the opportunity to work with the library and town volunteers to implement the Beta bike lanes, and for considering a new roadway design along this corridor. As you've heard from other members of the community, Hamilton-Wiggins is a key portion of the bicycle network, leading to the high school, middle school, Westminster Choir College, and in toward town, the library, Arts Council, YMCA, and many of the businesses, shops, and eating establishments in town. I've ridden it frequently for several years, and attest that the bike lanes made me feel much safer and much more comfortable. This past November, the circulation element of the Princeton Master Plan was updated and adopted by council to reflect the recommendations of the Bicycle Master Plan, which was prepared by Parsons Brinkerhoff. Implementing this plan will, and this is a quote from the document, realize the vision of a town where users of all ages can safely and comfortably ride, walk, or bicycle, regardless of their abilities, the purpose of their trip or their destination, The circulation element states the policy of the master plan is to entice people out of their cars and to promote using mass transit, bicycles, or walking as their primary means of travel. It lists 6 elements for promoting cycling. Among them are developing a community-wide bicycle network that is safe, continuous, connected, convenient, complete, and comfortable, improve safety for all roadway users, and prioritize bicycle safety for those with limited transportation options, create a low-stress bicycle network that is accessible to cyclists of all ages and ability levels, and encourage bicycle use for local trips to mitigate congestion and parking demand. The Hamilton-Wiggins roadway is listed as a major collector, and as we have shown through the Beta bike lane, it is an ideal street to provide a low-stress alternative to Nassau and is a central piece to the bicycle network. Again, thank you for providing the opportunity, and I hope you will agree with the value of creating a complete street on this corridor.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Your timing is quite good, Sam.
I'm Janet Haru, and I've been active on this issue for many years, but I'm really speaking as a, this is my personal experience. I ride my bike almost every day back and forth to the library. While the Beta bike lane was up, I rode Hamilton, and now that it's down, I have to go along Spring Street, and don't listen, police, but I head straight up Spring Street in the wrong direction, because without that Beta bike lane, there is no comfortable feeling way from my part of town, which is near the shopping center, to the center. I know it's illegal, and I do it very carefully, and I stop at the entrance to the parking garage, but honestly, cyclists have no other option from that side of town. We need that bike lane along Hamilton. Thanks.
Dan Rappaport, Copperwood. It's hard to say anything just as good as what else has been said tonight, and unlike what's on my shirt, I'm not here to change the facts, and I don't even think I need to remind you of the facts because they were already presented thoroughly. And so I'm aware that for as much as the members of the Bicycle Advisory Committee and the public who've spoken are in favor of the bicycle lane, that there are costs for everything, and I'm hoping greatly that the positive externalities will far outweigh the negative externalities, and I'm sure there are things that can't be quantified in terms of better health physically and mentally, and things having to do with better climate control and better traffic management that will result when bicycle lanes are built not only on Wiggins, Hamilton, but in any other place that the Bicycle Advisory Committee finds appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll say a few words. It's Sam Bunting, Dempsey Avenue. Apologies that I was late. I had to put a couple of small babies in the bath and then into bed, but it's good to be here. So I'm the secretary of the Complete Streets Advisory Committee, but I'm speaking here tonight principally in my own capacity as a local resident. You know, with regards to the bike lanes on Hamilton Avenue, I'd like to thank and congratulate Council Member Tim Quinn for his initiative in getting this project going, and also the various women on the Princeton Bike Advisory Committee who have championed this project and made it a reality. I think it's a real testament to their dedication in making this happen. I'm now on the Complete Streets Advisory Committee. Previously, I was on the Princeton Bicycle Advisory Committee, and I'd like to just make a couple of comments based on my experience regarding this corridor. Number one, with regards to this particular route, it is really an essential corridor for circulation in the town of Princeton. If you want to get from A to B, you either basically have to go along the Hamilton, Wiggins, Paul Robeson corridor or along Nassau Street. I know people will say that Franklin Avenue or something like that is an appropriate alternative, but it really is not. It doesn't have the same ability. For example, if you are going from Princeton High School to the public library, the only sensible way to go is really to take the Hamilton-Wiggins corridor. The alternative is to go along onto Witherspoon Street and then down Witherspoon Street, but Witherspoon Street is really a very congested and narrow road in which there are substantial conflicts between vehicles and cyclists. So really we need a safe bicycle facility on this route. And in the Complete Streets Advisory Committee, we considered the recommendation to run the pilot for the Beta bike lane, and our committee was in favor of this pilot. In fact, it was our opinion that it ought to be a longer pilot than what actually happened. On the other hand, I should point out that it was not a unanimous decision that it ought to take place. There were dissenting voices on the committee, and I understand that for you on council, it is a difficult decision to decide whether or not there ought to be bike lanes on this corridor, because there are competing uses, and I know there are people in the town who would like the status quo to remain, and I think that, you know, it's a difficult situation for you. But I would encourage you to consider the needs of all road users, including those using bicycles, and including members of different communities. For example, although there are people who need to park their cars to go to restaurants, there are also employees at those restaurants who are commuting from the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood to East Nassau Street, who are regularly using bicycles. And I think the town ought to keep their needs in mind when considering how best to allocate road space, and to always bear in mind the need for equity in how we allocate our road space. I think it's a great idea to push ahead with these bike lanes. Personally, although I am a relatively strong cyclist, when I am riding with my children on the bicycle, I am not comfortable to ride with cars. I am not prepared to put my children at that risk. Bike lanes makes a difference to me, and I'm sure it will make a difference to lots of other members of the community in Princeton. Thank you.
All right, is there anybody else who'd like to speak tonight on this issue? All right, seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to council and see if there's any final comments from, yep. Why don't you guys fight it out, and then somebody should speak.
No, I want to say I would like to thank everybody for speaking and sharing their opinions. I ride also, and because I'm on council, I do ride with the helmet, and I needed to ride with the helmet even before. I know it's hard. It's a hard head, but it's still. I think, you know, I think Adam Beardman mentioned living in Princeton for so many years. You know, I was born here, and riding my bicycle without worrying about cars was never an issue years ago, but today we're in a little different world. It was almost 4,000 or 3,600 cars any given time on that street is impressive. I mean, there wasn't 3,600 cars in town. I mean, much less trips on that street. But I am concerned, and I will be honest, I've never shun away from being honest. I am concerned of taking spots away from folks' homes that live there. I want to try to balance it somehow. I don't think that someone that, I mean, I'm assuming everyone has driveways. I'm assuming everyone has a driveway, so they can unload their groceries. And I guess the extra parking will be for, as we heard, for contractors or something of that sort. I was wondering if there's can be a way that we can provide a permit or somewhere else where they could park if we did take parking off that street, if a contractor did come and there was nowhere for them to park, to try to alleviate some of the concerns of the folks that are there now. And I heard Surendra's idea, which I never thought of, but where he said make one side a bicycle lane on one side and the other side a pedestrian lane, which was something unusual. I've never thought about that, but it was. I'm just thinking that if you think outside the box, there's many ways that you can come up with something. But I do agree that we do need a bike lane. I do believe that corridor is extremely important. That's from shortest corridor from one point to another for many things in town. But I am saying that I am want to be respectful of people. If you have a home now and you have parking in front of your house, imagine losing your parking for guests or for contractors or so forth, and find out where they will go when you need service. So I want to put myself in their shoes when it comes to that, even though I do think that the bicycle lane is important. Thank you.
Yes, I'll just jump in and say that I'm moved by how many people have come out tonight to talk, and it demonstrates how important this issue is. And it really, I'll go back to what I said earlier, which was that I've heard overwhelmingly positive feedback about the experiment. And to me, I want us to keep moving forward. I think the timing is propitious in the sense that we've got the parking study now, which demonstrated that we have the capacity. We just need to smartly manage our parking, and our consultants have said we should not be building more parking. And so we're at a time where we're rethinking that. We've committed to working with the merchants and finding a solution. So to me, that should not be holding us back. And instead, we should keep up this momentum moving forward. And I would sort of defer to Tim and Deanna, who've been thinking so hard about this, about exactly what the next steps are. But whatever it is, we ought to be keeping this momentum because this was really exciting, and the community came together in a way I haven't seen. So let's keep moving forward.
Yes, so I too am impressed by the level of interest and support. I myself, I also ride bikes, and my children, I want them to have a safe route. And we did participate when the Beta bike lane was up. We did use it, and it felt great. But I also take into consideration the concerns of the residents and people who use the parking, the employees who use that space for parking. And I was wondering if there's any way possible, Deanna, that we could monitor or survey who is currently parking there, a percentage of residents or employees. I don't know if, I know we did during the Beta bike lane, we monitored pedestrians and how many people were biking on that route. But I just wonder if there's any way that we can either survey or monitor who's actually using those parking spots. And also, whether it's a question or a comment, I suppose that we are anticipating that an improved parking system would alleviate concerns about loss of those parking spaces.
I'll answer both of those questions. Yes, we can definitely survey the people that are currently parking there. We are working closely with the parking consultant on a couple of different fronts related to employee parking. One, looking at establishing more on-street parking with very low-cost employee permit options. As well as looking to see if there are potential options of some sort of time limits on bike lanes as well. I know we've really shied away from that in the past. That had come up at one point with the eastern section of Hamilton, but you know, it's 3 years later. revisiting the issue to see if there's other options with that as well.
Thank you. And I know someone at some point suggested the possibility of perhaps returning parking there during the winter time when less people might not be using the bike lanes, but I'm wondering how that would work, if it is possible.
We'll have to take a look at that. I can't give you an answer right now, but it will be included in our review.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say that I don't think that the bike committee or anyone who's advocating for this was insensitive to the needs of the residents who live on that street. I think we did some pretty good outreach, and we heard both positive and negative. We heard some apprehension. We heard from people who, when they saw the bike lanes installed, thought that they could visualize it and that it was a good idea. And I just picking up on what Councilwoman Howard said about the timing, we have data that shows that we have parking capacity, and we're also looking at innovative ways of sharing private parking, adding private parking into the public mix. So it seems to me that there are solutions available that might not be as convenient for everyone, and we're just going to have to decide what the greater good is. But I think we've done this, we're doing this in a transparent way. Obviously, applaud everyone who came out to talk, either whether they were in support or expressed a concern. As I said, the beta was not a panacea. It was to help us visualize and to draw out the concerns. So,
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. I again want to thank Council. I'm not on. I want to thank Councilman Quinn and thank everybody who came out tonight, and thank our engineering staff, especially Deanna Stockton. Can you give us a sense of like if what you had in mind for the study in terms of how long that takes? I know you have a couple other things on your plate right now too.
So I have spoken with WSP, who is formerly Parsons Brinkerhoff. They not only completed the bike mobility plan for us, they are also working on a couple of traffic signal designs, which includes the Harrison-Hamilton intersection. And so they are going to put together a proposal for us to consider for this study. And I hope that I can bring it to council sometime at one of the August meetings so that we can continue to move ahead, as I heard, with the momentum that we've got now.
That's great. Okay, terrific. So it sounds like if there's agreement, it seems like that's a reasonable next step. And just wanted to reiterate, I mean, I think we're going to be looking at this through as many lenses as we can. We appreciate the public feedback. I think equity is something that you've heard over and over again tonight, and I think both equity for bicycle riders, equity for workers who are in town, who really rely on free parking, because when you're making minimum wage, it's hard to spend a big portion of your salary on parking. And you know, I think we have all those things in mind. We want to make this work. It's a really important corridor, and I have to say I was surprised and heartened by the outpouring of support we got from the neighbors when we first went out. Sometimes you knock on a door and you're preparing for one type of reaction, and I think for a lot of the people who live right in that neighborhood, I think they understand the importance. They want their sidewalks back too. So anyway, thank you again, everybody, tonight, and obviously there'll be more discussion on this and information as time goes on. So thank you. All right. Oh yeah, are there council reports, Ms. Howard? Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Quinn, any council reports? Ms. Fraga, I just have a very quick report. Mr. Cohen and I attended a meeting that Sue Hoskins from the Senior Resource Center put on. About 3 years ago, Princeton became an age-friendly community, and as part of that, we had a report about how to make ourselves age-friendly, and so now it's about 3 years later, so it's time to go revisit the plan, see where we are, and mark our progress. So just there's work going on that. Just wanted to let everybody know. Are there any staff reports? No?
I've got a short report. I'll send this through by email as well. Just an application update from the Engineering and Zoning Departments through July 10th. Comparison of last year numbers to this year numbers at the same time. Zoning permits are essentially the same number. This year we have 467 permits. Last year, 473. So essentially steady there. I do have to note that every year for the last probably 2 or 3 years, we have been increasing each year. Engineering permits, we are slightly down from last year. So 49 this year, 56 last year. New home permits are down, demolition permits are up, addition permits are up, pools are down. And so from the standpoint of demolitions, it's 15 permits this year to 11 last year, but the new houses are 15 this year to 21 last year. Pools have dropped this year. Last year we had 9 permits. This year it's only 3. So maybe that's our cooler summer or something. So I'll send these numbers around so that you'll see the update.
Okay, great. Thank you. And now we are at the time for our ordinance public hearing for tonight, 2018-14, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning solar panels in residential districts and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968, and the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. And this ordinance essentially makes it easier by removing some of the regulatory hurdles to add solar panels if you're if the solar panel would bump your house above the height limit for existing homes. Are there any questions or about this ordinance? I'd like to open up the public hearing.
Good evening. Elizabeth Kim, Historic Preservation Officer. The ordinance was reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission, and the concerns, minor concerns, shared with Council Member Cohen, although with his absence, I'm here to present some of the questions they have. So in historic preservation, I don't know if you know or don't know, but in the right-of-way, under Type 2, which is the former borough, or Type 1, which is the former township, which would mean anything within historic district, they don't permit solar panels to be visible, so specifically from the right-of-way. According to this, they just wanted to make sure that it's clear that they still need to come back for HPC. Now, I did talk to Jack West and Derek Bridger, and they said that the intent is that, yes, it's going to. And I guess the only concern they have is they don't want someone to be confused when they read this and they say, oh, well, according to this, it says, let me see, under Section 3 of the amended ordinance, which talks about the all ordinances and resolutions or parts thereof inconsistent with this ordinance are repealed. So I guess that they just want to make sure that anyone who's reading it is going to be clear that it still has to go to HPC, or may be confused under the Section 17A-228, which references as uses permitted as of right. So if someone reads that, they might say, oh, well, because of right, that means that we can put the solar panels in. So I think that they just want to make sure there's clarification, so there isn't an abundance of any type of misunderstanding or violations.
Right, okay, now thank you for that. I just want to turn over to Lucille. Do you think if we need to clarify that, or if that's clear already? I mean, I would think that if it's clear in the HPC ordinance about if something changes the appearance of something and you can see it from the street, that ordinance is still in place as it is.
Yes, and I think there's just some confusion with Section 3 would not change anything in the other ordinance. All this does is replace any existing ordinance related to solar piles in the zoning ordinance. It doesn't affect historic preservation or anything else.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any need for any change here.
Okay, but it will be in the record of this meeting, certainly what council's intent is. And it's really more about making it so that people don't have to go before the zoning board for variance if their solar panels are too thick. So, okay, thank you. Are there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of the public hearing? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Quinn. Seconded by Ms. Howard. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next, we come to our resolutions. The first is Resolution 18-259, resolution authorizing payment to Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad for properties located at 8 and 14 Clearview Avenue in the amount of $950,000. And this was part of the agreement that was reached with PFARS and the municipality through an MOU several years ago. Maybe not several years ago. Few years ago. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Liverman, seconded by Mr. Quinn. Any discussion or questions? We'll vote unless you have something to say. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes
Glad this
unanimously.
is moving forward. Thank you, Mark.
Yes,
for being here.
thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Get
if you
well
want to,
soon.
if you want to
Speedy
make an
recovery.
extra donation, check the PFARS website, and there's a place to donate. Okay. Next is 18-260, resolution authorizing a 10-year rights-of-way use agreement with Crown Castle, NG East LLC for purposes of locating, placing, attaching, installing, operating, controlling, and maintaining microcellular optical repeater equipment in the public way. Congratulations to whoever wrote that. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Quinn. Any questions on this resolution? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Thank you, Lucille, for your work on this. For this next resolution, I'm going to recuse myself for reasons I gave at a prior meeting because it involves affordable housing and because our plan proposed plan on affordable housing involves university properties. Because this might involve affordable housing, out of a preponderance of caution, I've been advised to recuse because my husband is an employee at the university.
And I'm going to join the mayor in recusing as well.
I'm just going to
Hey,
explaining
okay,
what Lance is
hold on.
doing.
Hey,
Because of quorum
I'm putting on
issues,
speaker,
we're
hold
putting Council President Crummiller on the phone.
Council President Quamillo, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. We have Resolution 18-261, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with LRK to perform an area in need of redevelopment investigation for Princeton Theological Seminary in the amount not to exceed $22,500. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
A little louder, Jenny.
Aye.
Oh, thank you, thank you. All right, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Okay.
Okay. And now we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature, passed by single vote. Are there any items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda? Actually, I have an item
Number
I'd like
two.
to remove. Yes. 18-263 is being removed just because it's some more work is needed for it. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 2?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Liverman, seconded by Mr. Quinn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. And is there a motion to adjourn? I'm going to give that to Ms. Howard. And